The other things to look for, let's see. We did have to use, have you heard of the, it's called the PSIF, but it's the rainy day fund that they use from the main budget. And they did have to dip into that this last year, and the subcommittee working on fiscal stability is recommending that they replenish that, put more in, and figure out a way to not have to use it, like funding us fully, so that they don't have to come up with those resources last minute at the end. So that's a good thing to do. So other education issues, administrative rules. I was talking to Daily News about this. People don't realize that all of the legislature's inaction at the end of this session to reauthorize all of Idaho's administrative rules means that the governor had to reissue them as temporary and proposed. So that means that all 8,000 pages of administrative rules could be subject to approval to the legislature. That's a lot of time to go through all those rules. But they're going to have to do something. I don't know what it'll be. But for education, that means that all of Idaho's content standards are at risk. So recently, groups have criticized content standards and are encouraging the legislature to abolish all of them. A few years ago, passing updated and accurate science standards was a hot-button issue, and these are also at risk. We do have a resolution coming to authorize those. The Idaho's minimum graduation standards could be at risk. Immunization requirements for Idaho school children are at extreme risk, and we will need support on those. And the guns in schools, and we brought that up. So we decided, we kind of broke this down. How can the public stay and keep involved in per student funding formula? I don't know that we said this very well, but a funding system that has a mechanism to identify our veteran teachers and receive additional funding from the state for them would be helpful. A funding system should have identification and adequate funding for alternative students and schools, while also allocating money for student populations that are at risk, low income, English language learners, and etc. The legislature should not consider a new funding formula until it has accurate data so that districts and charter schools can prepare accordingly. And other ways that you guys can be involved, seek out how your superintendents, teachers, and school board members need support. Ask us what we need. Each school district has different needs. Continue to advocate to lawmakers for full state funding of public schools. We're still relying on supplemental levies for our day-to-day needs. And it's easy, call, write, emails. Seek out information from us. One thing I wanted to say is that we also, you guys as voters, we need people to vote for. Right now we have, in Kendrick, one of our school board zones that is up for election has nobody running. In Moscow, one of the zones has nobody running. In Troy, 2 zones have nobody running. It becomes an issue when we don't have full boards. Did you get it?
We had a write-in.
You did have a write-in. Okay, so I'm going to take that off. Also. Yay! Okay, Moscow's good. So, and this is throughout the state. So, if we don't have people that are just, and we don't want just names on the ballot. We want people who want to do this job. Yeah.
Do you have any statistics on how children fare, how the schools turn out? And I'm not wording this very well, but I was horrified to find out how many school districts in the state of Idaho are down to 4-day weeks.
Oh.
And I just wondered, is there any kind of a place you can get information on how these students fare in the future? I mean, and I've talked to people who said, oh, well, the parents really like it because then they take that day extra day for the doctor appointments and all those other wonderful things. But
So that they don't
you
miss
don't
school.
see them cutting out the sports trips that are in the middle of the night and all that other stuff. But these kids that are only going 4 days a week, I just don't see how it can be a good deal.
Yeah, I don't know about long-term, like you were asking, as far as do they have success in college or they remediated. I don't know any of that. I do know that there are schools that, the schools that actually kind of thrive in it. We're early to jump on, and it was a significant cost savings to the school, which decreases the stress, and that's a climate. I would think that that has been helpful in a lot of ways, and I would say those of us that have considered it really didn't see great benefit in financially even. And so it's a very specific to a community. And so I would think, and I think that it's not forced upon communities, it's all voted on. And those communities that want it to work, make it work. And if you're not seeing, you know, the only thing we have to go on right now is these test scores and some of these state accountability measures. And so that's all we're seeing are those statistics. And you know, those are very interesting to me to watch. You know, one of my questions in the task force committee was, as a trustee on a local board, when my mission as a school is to, as a school leader, is to create students that want to learn and be lifelong learners and be successful as citizens. And we graduate them, and they have plans on, you know, at graduation what they're going to do. You can't tell me that kid is not, that's not a success. That is a kid that's going on in their life, that has the tools to do it. And yet, we have a graduation rate that, you know, statewide our graduation rates are subpar, but it's a standard that's been set with measures that have been set that don't reflect always what's happening in our schools, which is unfortunate, and that is what communities' perceptions are based on all that data that comes out that isn't telling the real story. And I feel like we have success in our schools do a fantastic job. There's nobody, I don't think, I never hear people say, oh, I hate our school, it's awful, our kids are bad. I never hear that. I hear people proud of their students. They're so, you know, we still include the arts in our schools. We support our students. They are active in our communities. We're all proud of our schools and our students, and they do well. And yeah, we all have outliers. That's the way life is. And we need to be better about talking about our schools. And it's very difficult to get a positive message out when the data that comes out is just about how we fail. But I don't think that fail is the whole picture.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
The districts that go to 4 days still have to have the same number of hours.
They do,
So,
yeah. But, and so I don't, yeah, I just don't know. I think, yeah.
The
So,
one thing you can tell them, the ones that are so caught up with the all comes down to the almighty dollar, is to get more bang for their buck, the younger the students
I
are.
agree,
So if
yeah.
they're gonna worry about their
that's part of the
precious-
research, right?
That's right,
That's part of the research. We have to be research-based.
yes.
We have the research. Let's do it.
Yeah.
That's what we're all
And
saying.
somebody on the state level needs to lead the charge.
Has your association done anything? I mean, I've read several reports. As a percentage of income, Idaho is the lowest tax state west of the Mississippi. I mean, our sales tax is low, our income tax is low, our gas tax is low. And there's money out there to be generated. Now, I'm not saying the gas tax should be used to fund education, but what I'm saying is if we raise the gas tax again, we're still 12 cents lower than Washington. The money that we would generate from the gas tax could go to roads, and the money we're taking out of the general fund for roads could, gee whiz, go to education.
There's,
Anyway, I'd love to see your association take a position
sure.
and do that analysis and say, you know, despite what everybody says, our taxes are not too high. And here are the things we could do if,
Here's a lovely example. When I was at San Antonio 2 years ago for a national convention, The former mayor of San Antonio was one of our keynote speakers, and they presented it. This is, we invest in our people, and we aren't gonna mess around. We are proposing 1/8 of a cent sales
A
tax.
what?
1/8 of a cent
1/8 of a cent, okay.
sales tax increase to fund full-day preschool for all children, and they did it. All the children of San Antonio, that is a lot of kids. 1/8 of a cent, so you cannot tell me that it is impossible to have something different. So, yes, it needs to be worked on. And we do have some resolutions coming forward, but it's primarily, so here's the problem. We have such disparity between the sizes of our schools. We have a few that are huge, right? And we just have huge growth in Ada County, you know, and they can't fund their schools. And so, well, we saw it with Lewiston. How long did it take Lewiston to get, it was 10 years, right, to get that bond passed? So we've got a resolution on getting a task force put together on property tax reform, a school construction property tax relief. I think those were the two main ones that we had. Updating a code in Idaho code to extend school levies. Yeah, there's stuff that people are, no, that's, I already said that one. Okay, so there are some that come from districts, so, and we did put together some guiding principles for our advocacy work, and these actually are established, because we were focused on money, and I was just like, we can't just focus on money all the time, we can't just say, restore us, restore us, restore us. We have to say, if we're gonna be leaders in education, and one thing that has changed in our association over the 10 years that I've been involved, not directly on the board, but in the 10 years since I've been a board member, is I feel like our association is less of a reactive.
More proactive.
Yeah, we're kind of driving legislation now, and we're the go-to people for legislators. They call on us more, and that's really, we set that goal, and I feel like we've made progress toward it. So this year, our guiding principles for our advocacy work are ISBA supports legislation that provides for local governance and decision-making. That's always key for us. ISBA is committed to supporting legislation that creates safe and inclusive environments for all students and staff without regard to race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, gender, ability, sexual orientation, national origin, immigration status, or native tongue. Well, we felt like we had to say them all because people aren't paying attention to them all, so I'll say that. Third, ISBA believes the state should provide school districts and charter schools with full funding of the current and future funding formulas. ISBA opposes any legislation that violates federal laws or the state constitution, which that's the vouchers right there. ISBA opposes unfunded mandates and will continue to advocate for funding for currently existing mandates. We do have some out there. ISBA supports legislation that allows school districts and charter schools to provide competitive compensation for all school employees in order to attract and retain quality staff. And ISBA supports legislation, policies, and initiatives that prepare young children for success in the K-12 education system and in life. So those are our principles instead of just fund us to the current status. You have,
Oh, I was just gonna put in a plug for Reclaim Idaho's Invest in, Reclaim.
I heard that, and I don't,
So it's
I don't know when they're coming.
$170 million raising a year for K-12 public schools.
Okay.
It's another initiative with the success of Proposition 2, at least the voters voting on it.
Okay.
Where we go next, get
Yeah.
back online again and close the gap and put your comments in about the restrictions. But it's going to impact fewer than 5% of all Idahoans. They have a funding formula for how it's going to, and it'll be $170 million a year more that goes into education.
Okay.
So
And
that's
then-
something to be watching for.
And then my last plug for Idaho School Boards Association is we do have a website, and during the legislative session, we have a governmental affairs committee, so all of our region chairs meet teleconference every Friday to get updated on what the current legislation is, where our resolutions are, We oftentimes have to reprioritize and shift things around and focus on something new from another committee that's coming out, but we put all of that in a weekly thing we call capital notes, and that is available on our website for anybody to read, and then on the Idaho state website, are all of the bills and where they're at and, where they're voting for, so.
I'll put
yeah.
that information in the next email I
Okay.
send out to our members, because we really
That's the best
follow
thing for us, yeah.
education.
Yeah, so
Issues.
our